The Arizona sun was a brutal, unforgiving hammer on the back of my neck. I wiped a sleeve across my forehead, my sweat immediately replaced by a fresh layer. The air in my grandparents' garage was thick with the ghosts of gasoline, old wood, and decades of accumulated desert dust. It was the summer after my college graduation, a liminal space between the structured world of academia and the terrifying, yawning chasm of the rest of my life. My task for the week, a self-imposed penance for this indecision, was to help my grandpa Frank clean out this decades-old mess. "Just take it one box at a time, Mark," my grandpa had wheezed that morning, patting my shoulder with a hand that felt like old leather. "Most of it's junk, but your grandma, God rest her soul, she never liked me throwing anything away. Said everything has a story." Grandma Eleanor had been gone 5 years, but her presence was still woven into the fabric of the house, especially here in this garage. Grandpa Frank, a man of few words and stoic demeanor, had barely touched her things since. So, I dove in. Boxes of old National Geographic magazines, their yellowed pages brittle to the touch. A crate of mason jars, dusty and empty. A set of golf clubs from what looked like the Eisenhower era. It was mind-numbing, repetitive work, and with every box, I felt the weight of my own uncertain future press down a little harder. What was I doing? A degree in history felt about as useful as these mildewed paperbacks I was stacking into a donate pile. It was late afternoon, the heat finally beginning to relent its assault, when I found it. Tucked behind a bald spare tire and a stack of warped cardboard, was a small, metal footlocker. It wasn't like the other boxes. It was sturdy, military green, with rust eating away at its corners and a heavy, combination padlock securing its latch. There was no label, no marking, just a layer of grime that felt like a skin. Curiosity, a welcome relief from the boredom, sparked inside me. I wrestled the locker out from its hiding place, the metal scraping harshly against the concrete floor. "Hey, Grandpa," I called out, "you know what's in this?" He shuffled into the garage doorway, squinting against the relative darkness. He leaned on his cane, his eyes fixing on the locker. A strange, unreadable expression flickered across his face, not recognition, but something heavier, like the shadow of a long-forgotten memory. "That old thing," he murmured. "Haven't laid eyes on it in 50 years, maybe more. It was my father's. Your great-granddad, William. He brought it back from the war." "The Second World War?" I asked, my interest fully ignited. History wasn't just a degree to me, it was a passion. Grandpa Frank nodded slowly. "The big one. He never talked about it. Never. Said whatever was in there could stay in there. We tried to get him to open it once, my mother and I, but he got so upset we never asked again. After he passed, we just stored it. The lock's probably rusted shut by now." He looked at me, his gaze intense. "You can try, Mark. But some doors are maybe best left closed." With that, he turned and shuffled back into the house, leaving me alone with the silent, green mystery. His warning only made the locker more compelling. A relic from my great-grandfather, a man I'd never met, a veteran who had sealed away a part of his past. I hefted it. It was surprisingly light. I shook it gently, but nothing rattled inside. It was a silent sphinx. For the next hour, I battled the lock. I tried every combination of numbers I could think of, birthdays, anniversaries, the year the war ended. Nothing. I used a screwdriver as a lever, but the old metal held fast. Frustration began to set in. Grandpa Frank was probably right, it was just a rusted shut box of nothing. I was about to give up, to consign it to the maybe later pile, when I had one last, brute force idea. I found a crowbar, wedged its tip into the latch, and threw my weight against it. My muscles strained, my face contorted with the effort. There was a sharp, protesting screech of metal, a sound that felt like it was tearing through time itself, and then a loud snap. The lock broke, the hasp flying off and clattering across the floor. The garage fell silent again, the echo of the violence fading. I stood there, panting, staring at the now unlocked latch. A part of me felt a pang of guilt, as if I'd violated a sacred trust. But the larger part of me was pulsing with anticipation. I took a deep breath, the dust-filled air catching in my throat. I knelt down, my hands hovering over the lid. This was it. With a sense of ceremony I hadn't felt in a long time, I lifted the creaking lid. The inside smelled of aged paper, old cloth, and the faint, metallic tang of rust. The contents were sparse, neatly arranged, as if packed with great care. On top lay a folded American flag, the kind given to military families at a funeral. Beneath that was a standard issue, olive drab uniform, the fabric thin and fragile. I lifted it out carefully. It felt insubstantial, like holding a ghost. Next was a small, black and white photograph in a tarnished silver frame. It showed a young, handsome soldier, my great-grandfather William, his face unlined, his eyes clear and full of a hope that the future had not yet extinguished. He had his arm around a beautiful, dark-haired woman, my great-grandmother, Clara. They looked impossibly young, their smiles blazing with a post-war optimism. Beneath the photo was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded red ribbon. I untied them carefully. The paper was brittle, the ink gone brown with age. They were love letters, from Clara to William, filled with the mundane details of home, a victory garden, a new dress, how much she missed him. They were beautiful, poignant, but not, I felt, the secret the trunk was guarding. I set them aside. At the very bottom of the trunk, lying flat, was a simple, wooden box, darker and finer grained than the crude locker. It had no lock. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the final layer. I lifted the box out. It was heavier than it looked. I placed it on my knees and slowly opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were two objects. The first was a medal. Not an American one. It was a German Iron Cross, its black and silver form stark and menacing. I recoiled slightly. Why would my great-grandfather, an American soldier, have this? A war trophy, I reasoned. It was a common enough thing. But it felt wrong. Out of place in this carefully curated collection of memories. My eyes then fell on the second object, and my breath hitched. It was a small, leather-bound journal. The cover was worn smooth with age, but it was intact. This was the voice of the Sphinx. This was the story. With trembling hands, I picked it up. The leather was cool and dry. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, precise, a cursive taught in a different century. September 12, 1944. Somewhere in France. The rain is ceaseless. It turns the world to mud, a thick, clinging mud that seems to want to pull us down into the earth itself. We took a small village today. The fighting was fierce, house to house. I saw things, I did things, that I will not write here. They are for God to judge, not this page. We lost Miller, a kid from Iowa who just wanted to go home and farm. He won't be. I was transfixed. This was raw, unfiltered history. My great-grandfather's voice, silent for over 70 years, was speaking directly to me. I spent the next hour completely lost, reading page after page. It was a chronicle of fear, exhaustion, and the small, desperate moments of camaraderie that kept men sane. He wrote of the cold, the hunger, the deafening roar of artillery, and the eerie silence that followed. Then, I reached the entry dated November 18, 1944. We were advancing through the Hurtgen forest. A place of nightmares. The trees are shattered, the ground a churned-up mess of shell holes and broken things. The fog is so thick you can taste it. We got separated from our company. Just me, Donnelly, and a new replacement, a boy named Cooper who couldn't have been more than 18. We were lost, completely. The sound of gunfire was everywhere and nowhere. We stumbled upon a small, isolated farmhouse. It looked abandoned, half its roof blown off. We moved in, clearing the rooms. It was empty. We decided to hold up for a few hours, wait for the fog to lift, try to get our bearings. In the cellar, behind a false wall of crates, we found them. A German officer, a major, and his wife. She was clutching a small child, a girl no more than 3 or 4 years old. The major was wounded, a nasty gash on his leg that was clearly infected. He looked at us with defiance, then resignation. He raised his hands. We were trained to take prisoners. But the rage, after what we'd seen in the forest, after losing Miller, after the constant, grinding fear, it was a white-hot fire in my veins. Donnelly raised his rifle. No more prisoners, he snarled. The German officer closed his eyes, holding his daughter tighter. His wife began to sob silently. I looked at that little girl. She had her mother's eyes, wide with a terror she was too young to fully understand. And in that moment, I saw Clara. I saw the future we were supposed to be fighting for. A future that wasn't about killing a wounded man and his family in a cellar. Stand down, Donnelly, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. He turned on me, his face a mask of fury. What? They're the enemy, William. The fight's over for him, I said, gesturing to the major. Look at his leg. Look at the child. A tense silence filled the cellar. Cooper, the young replacement, just looked back and forth between us, terrified. Finally, Donnelly lowered his rifle, cursing under his breath. This is a mistake. We gave them what little food and medical supplies we could spare. The major, who spoke a little English, told me his name was Klaus Vogel. He wasn't a Nazi, he said. He was a schoolteacher, conscripted. He thanked me, his voice thick with emotion. He gave me his Iron Cross, not as a symbol of his service, but as a token of his gratitude. A reminder, he said, that humanity can survive even in hell. He made me promise to get a message to his cousin in Switzerland if I survived, to let them know his family was safe. We left them there in the cellar. We never spoke of it again. Donnelly was killed 2 days later by a sniper. Cooper, I don't know what happened to him. The war took him, too, I suppose. I stopped reading, the journal heavy in my hands. The garage around me had vanished. I was in that cold, damp cellar in the Hurtgen forest, standing beside my great-grandfather as he made an impossible choice. This wasn't just a story from a history book. This was my flesh and blood. He had disobeyed the unspoken rule of a brutal war. He had chosen mercy over vengeance. He had saved a family. And he had never told a soul. He had carried this secret, this profound act of compassion, locked away in this trunk for the rest of his life, burdened by the fear that his comrades would see it as cowardice or worse, treason. A wave of emotion crashed over me so powerfully it brought tears to my eyes. It was a complex stew of feelings, pride, awe, sadness, and a profound sense of connection to a man I had never met. This was his truth. This was the story Grandma Eleanor had sensed was in everything. I sat there for a long time, just holding the journal, letting the immensity of it all settle over me. The heat, my career anxieties, the dust of the garage, it all seemed trivial now. I was holding a piece of living history, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, our choices define us. I knew what I had to do. I carefully packed everything back into the trunk, except for the journal and the photograph. I carried them into the house. Grandpa Frank was in his recliner, watching the evening news. "Grandpa," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." I sat down opposite him and placed the journal and the photograph on the coffee table. I told him everything. I didn't just summarize. I read him the entire entry from November 18, 1944. As I read his own father's words, I watched the stoic mask on my grandfather's face slowly crumble. His lips trembled. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. When I finished, the room was silent except for the low murmur of the television. He reached out a shaking hand and picked up the photograph of his young parents. "All these years," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I always thought he was haunted. He'd have nightmares. He'd jump at loud noises. We just thought it was the war. The violence. We never knew he was carrying this." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming. "He was a hero." "He was," I said, my own throat tight. "A different kind of hero." That night, something shifted in the house, and in me. The ghost that had haunted Grandpa Frank had been given a name, and it was not a demon of guilt, but an angel of mercy. He talked more that evening than he had in years, sharing fragmented memories of his father, piecing together the quiet, reserved man he knew with the courageous young soldier from the journal. For me, the uncertainty that had plagued me evaporated. History wasn't just about dates and battles in a book. It was about people. It was about stories like this one, hidden in attics and garages and memories, waiting to be discovered. I knew then that I wanted to find these stories, to preserve them, to give voice to the silent truths of the past. But the story wasn't over. The most unexpected part was yet to come. Inspired, I spent the next few weeks doing research. Using the details from the journal, the name Klaus Vogel, the location, the date, I began the painstaking process of seeing if I could find any trace of the family my great-grandfather had saved. It was a long shot, a needle in a haystack of millions of war records and displaced persons. I posted on historical forums, contacted archives in Germany, and even hired a researcher overseas. Months went by with little more than dead ends. I had almost given up hope when I received an email. The subject line was, "Inquiry regarding Klaus Vogel, Hurtgen Forest." My heart leapt into my throat. I opened it. It was from a man named Karl Vogel, a historian living in Bonn. He wrote that his grandfather was named Klaus Vogel, a schoolteacher who had served as a major and was indeed reported missing in the Hurtgen forest in late 1944. His grandfather had survived the war, had been captured by American forces a week after the incident in the cellar, and had returned to his family. He had spoken often of the American soldiers who had shown them mercy, who had saved his life and the lives of his wife and daughter. He had never known their names. I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type a reply. I introduced myself, explained who my great-grandfather was, and attached a scanned image of the journal entry. The reply came the next day. Carl was overjoyed, emotional. He confirmed the story his grandfather had told him matched the journal entry exactly. He told me that the little girl in the cellar, his aunt, was still alive. Her name was Anya, and she was now a grandmother herself, living in a small town in Bavaria. She had often spoken of the kind American soldiers who had spared them, a story that had become a foundational legend in their family. Carl provided an email address for Anya. With a feeling of surreal disbelief, I composed an email. I told her who I was, the grandson of William. I told her I had found his journal. I attached the photograph of my great-grandfather. Her reply was swift and filled with a profound, palpable gratitude that brought fresh tears to my eyes. She wrote in halting, but clear English. "Dear Mark," it began. "For my entire life, I have carried a memory of a young soldier's face in a dark cellar. A face of conflict, then of kindness. My father told me that man gave us the gift of our lives. I have prayed for him, for his family, every day for over 70 years. To now know his name, to see his face again in this photograph, to know he had a good and long life, this is a blessing I never thought I would receive. You and your family are a part of our story, a part of our hearts. Thank you." We began a correspondence, Anya and I. She sent me pictures of her family, her children, her grandchildren. She told me about her life, a life that would have been extinguished in a cold cellar in 1944 if not for a single, courageous choice. We made plans to meet the following summer, in Germany. I sit here now, a year later, looking at the boarding pass on my phone. I'm flying to Munich tomorrow. The old footlocker sits in my apartment, no longer a locked secret, but a cherished family heirloom. My career path is clear now. I'm working as an oral historian, recording the stories of veterans and their families. Something truly unexpected happened that day in my grandfather's garage. I couldn't believe it then, and I can barely believe the ripple effects now. I went in looking for a way to kill time and found a purpose. I unlocked a trunk and unlocked the meaning of my own life. I discovered that the past is not a dead thing, but a living, breathing force that can reach across generations to heal old wounds, connect strangers across oceans, and remind us that the smallest act of compassion can echo for a lifetime, and beyond. The greatest stories aren't always the ones shouted from the rooftops. Sometimes, they are the ones whispered from a dusty, forgotten trunk, waiting for the right moment to be heard.